we both come from a very similar kind of reason as to why we started looking into this, because you came at it from a fear of death, and so did I.
Ah,
Mine.
That's right. I remember reading that or hearing that with your talk. Yeah.
Yes. It came about with anxiety disorder and depression, which started off with a fear of death, because I was always very materialistic. I was brought up with a atheistic background, not fundamental atheism, but just atheism in terms of I just never really was interested in whether there was a God or not.
Sure.
And I always believed, as did my mum and dad, that essentially when you die, and that's it. And that idea terrified me.
Yeah.
But I believed it because it made logical sense. And then since the anxiety and the depression, which caused a huge fear of death, I began looking into it a bit more through necessity rather than interest, although the interest did build. And that's where I began looking at the evidence and the different areas of it, and started to really get an interest into consciousness and life after death and that sort of thing.
Yes. And it is a similar story. You and I had this very similar story.
You were brought up with an atheistic background as well, weren't you?
Yes, I was, and I also was terrified when my mom told me that after death you just disappear. So that was not what I wanted to hear.
No, it is a terrifying thought. You see a lot of people that say they don't want there to be an afterlife; they want to just vanish into nothingness forever. And I think that's a terrifying concept, because forever, if you just try and imagine forever, it's a very long time plus some to never ever be aware again. We can't even begin to understand what that must be like, and that terrifies me.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I wanted to have significance.
And you did a lot of research for
Dr. Jeffrey Long.
His name escapes me. Dr. Jeffrey Long with the NDRF.
Yeah, that's right.
And he created a collection of near-death experiences and other similar phenomenal experiences.
He has thousands now. I would think 5,000 or 6,000 people have sent in their experiences. So that's really a big base to collect from.
So what was your role in researching those?
What was my role? Well, he asked for a volunteer, and I said yes, I would do it. And so what I did was I would take each one of the stories or the experiences, and I would tear them apart, tear the report apart, and find out how many people had a death experience. I mean, how many people went through a tunnel, and how many people went to an Earth-like kind of existence, or how many people telepathy, did they have telepathy, and what about hearing? And so there was just a huge list of questions, and so I would tear that apart and make count them. So actually there was a program, and I would enter the program in saying that this person had a tunnel, and this person saw a light, and this person saw, so each thing I would report it. And so that's what the research was. And when I first started to do the research, I was pretty well, mostly like most people, interested in what happened, what the people were talking about. And I'd already read quite a few, but I still wanted to know more. And but after a while, I pretty well knew what happened, and then I became much more interested in the deeper kind of spiritual learning and lessons that were being brought back. And that's what my book is about.
Yes, and you mentioned in your book your own spiritual experiences, which took place. So can you briefly explain what happened?
Sure. I've had several, so I think you're talking mostly about the one, there was 3 different experiences. That's one at the beginning of the book. There were 3 different experiences, sorry, and the experiences were linked, but at the time I didn't know that, and I certainly didn't know I was going to have three, or I would have recorded. Actually, I would have known how many days between and so on. Anyway, I had the first experience. I was doing dishes and at the kitchen sink, and there's a window above the sink, and I'm looking out in the backyard, and there's a crab apple tree there, and I really wasn't thinking about anything that I can even know. I don't know what I was thinking, to be honest, but anyway, wasn't anything important, and all of a sudden I became the tree, and the tree was me. There was no separation, no difference between us. You know, even the life form within that tree and me was identical. And so I then became the bird that was in the tree and the bug the bird was going to eat. I became fish and grass and any kind of life form that I thought of, I became it. And that was fascinating. I was just absolutely blown away by it. I had read something like that because I'd been studying various spiritual kinds of concepts since I was in my mid-teens. So I had read about cosmic consciousness. I just didn't think I would experience it. And so when that happened, I was absolutely thrilled. You know, it only had maybe a minute, but probably not even that long. But it felt like about a minute. And it was just such a great experience. I was very thrilled. But, you know, I no answer for it. All of a sudden, there I was washing dishes again. And so that was the end of that. The next experience, as I said, was days later. And I don't know how many days. And this time I'm wiping fingerprints off the hall walls. And all of a sudden, I'm not looking at the fingerprints, or at least I'm not looking at the wall. I'm seeing an atom with the electrons, the nuclei in the middle, and the electrons going around. And then I saw that expand to our solar system with the sun and the planets going around. And then that expanded to a galaxy with the nuclei, or the center of the galaxy, and everything spinning. And that just kept getting bigger and bigger until I was looking at the micro and the macro universe. And throughout this whole thing, it was almost like my brain had been taken over, actually. But throughout this whole thing, I was getting the message, I guess I would call it messages, although it was more like a knowing kind of thing, that this didn't just happen, that there was order and planning and an intelligence behind all of this. And that was really quite interesting for me. But then the next thing I got a message, and it said that my being was intricately connected with the operation of the universe. Well, when I heard that, that was not a good thing. I was not happy because I felt like it meant that I was going to be responsible somehow. And how could I be? I mean, I'm no bigger than a speck of dust when you come to the whole universe. Mm-hmm. So I was not happy with that message at all. And then that was the end of it. That was the end. But when I got that message, it was so harsh. I mean, not that that's the wrong word. It was so strong inside of me that I knew I couldn't deny it. It was an absolute fact. But I still didn't like it. So then a few days later again, and now I'm in the living room picking up toys from my kids. And all of a sudden there was a presence in the room with me. And I felt this presence. I couldn't see anything. Like all I could see was the living room. But I still felt this presence there. And then I felt more love than I can ever describe. It was like this huge, enormous blanket of love was being wrapped around me. And I just felt all this deep, deep love. And then after the love, I heard message. Oh, and I felt like I was connected. Somehow I was connected to this, whatever, the presence. Mm-hmm. And then I heard words in my ear, very clear, that said, "This is where you came from, and this is where you will return." So that took away my fear of death right away, because if I was going to go to something so beautiful and loving, then what was I afraid of,
Yeah.
And then after that, aside from walking 3 feet off the ground, I was so excited and thrilled about it. Nothing bothered me. Sorry, but I was so excited about that experience, and but after that, I used to bite my fingernails down so deep that there was no nail I could grab anymore, and it was just horrible, ugly, and so after that, I looked down one day and I had nails. I had long nails. Well, not long, but I was growing nails, and I stopped biting.
Yeah.
But so that was
without even noticing. Mm.
Yeah, I didn't even notice until one day I looked down and there was nails.
So these experiences, you hear a lot of experiences, especially through the internet, of people that experience this oneness. But to me, someone who was brought up with a materialistic outlook, it's difficult to I suppose understand what that experience must be. That people that say, like you, suddenly I became everything and I became this. I can't imagine that experience, because if someone was to say that, I'd think, right, well, for example, if you were to say that you became the bird, as you say, I'd be thinking, so she then suddenly was that bird from its point of view. Yeah. And the tree from its point of view, but it's a tree. How can it have a point of view? This sort of thing. So how would you describe that experience? If you
I don't know that I can explain it, because you're right. It's so not what one would explain or expect. But people who have death experiences, almost everybody has the same feelings. When they get out of their body, almost right away, they start to feel that they're connected with everything. Some people don't go through a tunnel. They might wind up in the outer space floating around. And those people in the outer space will feel like they're part of it, that those planets and those suns and stars and whatever are them. Mm-hmm. And there's no way I don't know how I can put that into words, except that that's a very common experience with people who have had death experiences.
Mm-hmm. So let's say, you're stood at the kitchen looking out the window doing the dishes, and then suddenly this experience overcomes you. Is it a feeling? What happens to your sense of sight, your sense of sound, and everything else? Does that change, or is it?
I don't think I heard a thing. I never had thought about that, but when I think everything just disappeared, and it was because I knew I was washing dishes, but I was completely unconscious of it. I don't even think I just stood there. I was like I was taken in by it all, and I can't describe the feeling because it's been so long. That was in 1973 that I had that experience. So I can't describe it. I'm sorry. I just know that it was just a knowing. It was a deep knowing within that this was the way it really was.
And I know a lot of these experiences are very much beyond our ability to use language to describe. That's the most common thing with the near-death experience and other experiences.
And one of the things that, just to interject here, people who do meditation on a regular basis will have these kind of experiences too. Mm-hmm.
The voice that you heard that mentioned that this is where you come from, this is where you'll return to, was that as commonly experienced kind of a telepathic connection, or was it more an audible voice you heard?
It was both. Excuse me. When I was looking at the wall and the atoms and the planets and things, that was telepathic. Mm-hmm. But when I was in the living room with the toys and things, and that presence there, that was verbal. I heard it in my ear, my right ear.
What did the atoms? Sorry, what did the atoms and everything look like? Was that an image in your mind, or was it? Did it look physical as anything else?
It didn't. I didn't see anything. I just saw my living room. But what I felt was energy. I felt like it was positive energy force. That was what it felt like. Some kind of loving energy force.
Okay. So you were looking at your wall, and then what was the experience with the atoms and the universe and the galaxies?
That was telepathic, and that's one where I was telling you that I was getting this understanding. I think that's the best way to put it. An understanding that this didn't just happen by accident, that the planets and the stars and the universe has order and planning, and everything is planned. And there's a great intelligence behind all of that. And I think that the message that I heard, that my being was intricately connected, means everybody's being, every one of us is intricately connected. It's just the way it is.
And again, that's a very common experience amongst the near-death experiences.
Yes. The oneness. That's what people talk about. They'll call it the oneness, or mostly that's the words they use. The unity. But they most often will call it. Sometimes now it's being called non-duality.
Mm-hmm. So when you were doing your research, looking at the experiences for Dr. Jeffrey Long, did you ever come across any cases that seemed illegitimate? And if so, how could you tell the difference?
Certainly, yes. Not too many on his, not too many there, actually, to be honest. There's very few that are on his. It's the odd one, and you wonder about them. Wait a minute, this doesn't feel right. It just doesn't. That kind of thing wouldn't happen. And so then it's things like one of the things is judgment. It's a big one, because people who believe in judgment feel that that's what should be there, and so they will report that, even though that's not possible. It's literally not possible to feel judgment. But anyway, so that's one of the big things that people will talk about is, and sometimes they get too fanciful, fancy, like they're too fanciful, and you wonder, you think, oh, wait a minute, I've never heard that before, or some of them. They have other elements, because there are universal. Okay, so I should say, first of all, no two people have the same death experience. So when one person has one death experience, doesn't mean that it's the same as everybody else's. That's one point. But there are universal parts of the experience, like, for example, telepathy, or traveling by thought, or being able to see 360 degrees. Those are just small ones, but those are part of the experience. And so when people report, if they don't include some of those universal things, I'm starting to think, maybe, but as I go on, and one of the places I do find a lot of false ones is on YouTube. Quite a few on YouTube. They're not quite real.
So, yes, there are certainly fundamental parts of the death experience that are shared equally, although we do see that there are cultural differences between the content of near-death experiences. Many that are sceptical to this kind of experience would say, well, if they're all going to the same place, we would expect that they see exactly the same thing. As in, if we go to Australia, if we go to see the Sydney Opera House, for example, we'd see exactly the same thing regardless of our culture. But that doesn't seem to be the case in near-death experiences. What would you say to that?
Yeah, because it's a spiritual experience. It's not a physical one. And so that's one of the reasons. The other reason, and this is hard for most people to understand, although I think more and more people are starting to get it, because we take an active role. We are creators. That is my big message with my book and so on, is that we are creators, you and I and everybody else in the world. We create our life, and we continue to create when we leave here. And so we create our death experiences up to the time that we enter into the light. Mm-hmm. People who continue on and don't come back enter into the light, this big, huge, amazing, blow your mind light. And the light is so beautiful that it's amazing. And it's like what I described. It's filled with love and power and anyway, it's a being. It's a live being that will communicate with them and so on. And people will ask, "Are you God?" And the being will say, "Well, I'm the creator. I'm the one that made all that kind of thing." It never uses any of our words to identify itself like God or Allah or any of those words. It just doesn't use those kind of language. But it does say, "Oh yeah, I created things," or "I created that," whatever. Yes. So that's one of the things that it does. It's very clear about. But when we enter into the light, the people that enter in and stay there, or the people that have entered and come back, some of those have done that as well. That's a beautiful experience. And then they find out that they become the light. They actually are the light. And then when they stay there, they become the creators, and they start creating. And they're the light. They are the light. And so that's amazing. That's just, I think, blow your mind kind of stuff. And I think it's beautiful. It's really beautiful.
Yes, and it's very similar to the kind of experience you hear in out-of-body experiences, or what's commonly known these days as astral projection, in which individuals are able to leave their body and create at will into
exactly
what they
so we
believe
are
becomes
creators.
the case.
Yeah. Exactly.
So it seems that people who have near-death experience or actual death experiences, which they seem to be more, and out-of-body experiences take place in a very similar environment.
No. A death experience is a death. Mm-hmm. Okay? People, their heart stops, their organs break down, they are dead. And then they have the experience. People who are astral projecting or out of body experiences, I see those as a spontaneous something or other that happens spontaneously, and you're looking down at yourself all of a sudden, and then it only lasts for maybe, I doubt that it lasts a whole minute, and the next thing you're back in your body again. And that kind of thing is spontaneous. The person who has them they're surprised by them because they've never expected anything like that. But astral projection is when a person teaches themselves to leave their body, and then they're there, they know what to experience, and if they've done it enough times, then they have control over the experience, and they can create what they want, like just what you said. They become the creators. So that is true.
And we can look to people like Robert Monroe, who's a pioneer in that kind of area, to see that sort of experience.
Exactly. Yes.
So, one of the common... Sorry, were you about to say something?
No, it's okay.
Okay. One of the common returns that you hear from people about near-death experiences, well, they weren't really dead because they came back. The brain was still working, and how can we trust the experience of a dying brain to assume that it was real? Yes.
Well, the brain continues to work for a half hour to 3/4 of an hour, and that's the brain stem that leads down into the spine. So it's not the whole brain. It's just the brain stem that has electrical activities that continue. But that doesn't mean that you can revive that person when that brainstem has electricity. It has nothing to do with being alive, okay? But anyway, it doesn't matter, because that lasts for about half hour to 3/4 of an hour. And after that, there's nothing. It's gone. There's no activity at all. But many of these experiences last much, much longer than 3/4 of an hour. They last for hours and hours. They've anywhere from 4 to, well, it isn't unusual for people to wake up in the morgue, and they may either be in rigor mortis, or they may have, they're on their way. They're starting to get rigor
the process has started.
And that takes 13 to 14 hours for rigor mortis to fully set in. So that's a long time to be, gone. And so I think that can't be the breaking down of the brain. It can't be the chemistry, and it can't be hallucinations. It just doesn't make sense. Another thing is that people who have had death experiences come back with information that they couldn't possibly know. They have information on people that have been dead for years and years, or they have private information for somebody that person doesn't know. It's just information that they couldn't possibly know.
Known as veridical perception.
Yes. And so I think death experiences are a medical situation. That's where they belong.
A miracle, did you say? Sorry.
No, medical.
Medical.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that I would love to see the medical profession do a thorough proper research. And I want every single person who has died and returned, whether they had an experience or they didn't have an experience, and what medicines or chemistries did they have put into their bodies, and just all kinds of things. How long were they gone for? Would it have been past when the brain had stopped working, and so on? Because we really need a serious investigation on that.
We do, and I'd agree. Although I suppose the only issue is when you bring in the moral question of whether it's moral to do that to someone who's dying, and whether it'll be funded, which it probably wouldn't be.
Oh no, I meant the people who have come back, the people who have died and returned.
Oh, okay, I see.
Do research on them.
Yes, although the only way you could gather the data on their brain state and the chemicals that they that's present there would be to hook them up to these machines while they're in the process of dying, effectively. No,
because it's written down what they gave the doctors have given to the patient. So it's written down these would be hospital records. It wouldn't be somebody who died in a car crash or, some other kind of accident or illness or something. It would be somebody who had died in the hospital, where everything is recorded, how the time of death, how long they were gone, what medicines they were given, if they were operated on, what were they given, for to put them under, and all of those things. They need to have a thorough examination.
Mm-hmm. Although that wouldn't be able to show you what the brain was doing and what chemicals were being released in the brain naturally at that time. So although it would be very good to see that kind of thing, it would still. The skeptical people would still be saying, well, we can't see inside the brain. There might be something going on we can't record. And I think that's the difficulty. Although there are studies, such as Sampania's Aware study, which are in process, in which he's putting up. I believe he's still doing it. He's putting up targets for people to see when they're out of body.
Sure.
If I was to come out of my body, I wouldn't be looking at that. I'd be freaking out.
Yeah.
So I don't know how successful that will be. There are doctors such as Penny Sartori, who's done a lot of studies. Pim van Lommel, of course.
Yes.
All of which have very, very strong evidence, in my opinion, to suggest that it does happen, although people will contest that, we can't measure the brain, we can't do this, we can't do that.
Yeah, I think there are always going to be skeptics that won't accept no matter what. If they don't believe it, they don't believe it. And I actually not admire, but I appreciate them, because we need people who are skeptics. We need skeptics.
Yes.
In the world.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I don't mind being skeptics at all. It keeps us on track, It makes us prove our point.
Yes, it does. I mean, the argument that we have mentioned already, that the brain is still active, to me is a very weak argument. And I saw a very good analogy in one of the Facebook groups. Maybe you saw it as well. Having a television set completely destroyed, although one LED light on the motherboard is flashing, and that's to compare with the brainstem minor activity taking place in the brainstem. And it's to assume that just because that LED light is still flashing, the television has the potential to create an image and sound similar to the way that the brain must be able to produce hallucination with that tiny, tiny amount. It doesn't make sense. And I thought that was a very, very good analogy.
Yeah, yeah. And so what would if it's past the 3/4 of an hour, which is not normal, it's usually a half hour, but I'm stretching it a bit there. So if it's past, say, 1 hour that the person is gone, and you know that the brain has stopped, then there can't be anything else happening in the brain.
No,
you can't argue the brain then.
I think the only thing you could say at that point is one of three options. Either A, the person is lying. 2, the person is exaggerating. Maybe they weren't completely dead. Maybe they weren't in the morgue. That sort of thing. Or 3, the experience took place as the brain was still somewhat active.
Yeah.
Before they went into the rigor mortis.
That's why I say it has to be the people in the hospital. So all of that is recorded.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm sure you know of Dr. Eben Alexander.
Yes.
Someone who I've had the privilege of speaking to.
Good.
And his experience is a remarkable one, because it is very, very illustrative and very similar to actual death that takes place, because his neocortex was completely ravaged by E. coli gram-negative bacterial meningitis, which stops any function of the neocortex, kills it effectively. Yeah. And during this experience, or during that time, he had this experience which seemed to be validated between the time since he went into coma and then between then and when he woke up, during which time his brain wasn't functioning, from what the doctors and the medical records show. And the only real argument that the skeptics and the people that rebuke his experience can say is that he was exaggerating for effect, and bring up his past supposed errors in his practice. Yeah. Without actually looking at the experience itself. Yeah, yeah. But his is a very good example.
Yes. That's true. Do you know that there's people who are blind and deaf can hear and see when they're out of their body?
Yes, that is something that very much interests me.
Yes.
The thing that I wonder is how, if these people we'll take the blind people, for example, we can only really go on their word that they're seeing what they see, but we don't know what they're... But then how can they describe something without ever having the experience of seeing?
But they may. I don't know that, but I do know that they can watch an operation and tell the doctors who came, who went, what they looked like, what they were thinking, and what they were doing.
Mm-hmm. Can you briefly give an example of one such experience?
Well, I'm thinking blind people, a blind person that there's a great book that, it's written ages ago, but in the 90s, but it's still a really good investigation, was on blind people that had near-death experiences and came back. And they talk about being able to see all kinds of things. And in ways that I don't understand, they knew what they were seeing. Now, I don't understand that either, because if they were blind, how could they describe it?
Exactly,
But perhaps they were blind later in life and not right from birth. So they would, but they've been able to, but anyway, the book is called Mindsight. That's it. MIND Sight.
I'm aware of it. Yeah.
Dr. Kenneth Ring and Sharon Cooper, I think it is. Yeah. So that's a book that talks completely about, that's all they talk about is blind people. And there are blind experiences on NDERF as well. So if anybody wanted to look up them, they would be able to find them.
Great. So what was it, after your many years of researching the near-death experience, what aspect of it was the most convincing to you that they are genuine experiences beyond hallucination, beyond?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that, and I mentioned this in the book, one of the things that doctors have to go by is death that happens in the hospitals. And usually a person who has died in the hospital, the crash test, what do you call it? The crash, whatever, the cart is right there to pump their heart and get them going again. So usually people are only dead a matter of minutes. If they have say a heart attack or whatever. If they die in the hospital, they are revived quickly, usually. And so that's not enough time to decide whether it was the brain breaking down or the medical, the chemicals in the brain or whatever, any other thing, the medicines that they had. So, or hallucination. It's not enough time. Another thing is that a lot of doctors that debunk talk about things that happen at the very beginning of the experience, such as the tunnel or the light and things like that. But they don't talk about the whole experience. It's just snippets of the very beginning. Another thing, as I've just talked about, is that they come back with information that they could not possibly know. They can describe who came in the room and who left, and what the doctors were even thinking. And that, I think, is pretty amazing that they can know that. Yeah. The other thing is that, and I have a few in my book. There's a woman named Stella, and Stella was hit by a car. And so she had a death experience, and then the ambulance that was taking her to the hospital got lost. Or got into an accident, or something happened that it couldn't continue. And so she had to be moved from, and now she's dead, remember this is a body. She's above at this point, she's come back down, but she's floating above the ambulance, and she's not in the body. So anyway, they put her body in a private car, and the private car takes her to the rest of the way to the hospital. At the time of, I think it was an accident, because the woman who was in the back with her, the attendant, lost her ring. And it was a valuable ring for her. It was from her mother, and she treasured that ring. So, but she couldn't find it. She looked and looked and couldn't find it. So when Stella was revived, and this girl that was in the back with her came to visit, Stella was able to tell her where her ring had fallen, so she was able to go and get it. And and the fact that even that Stella knew that the ring had fallen was, like she shouldn't have known that. She knew that she'd been transferred to a private vehicle, and she described the people that drove, brought her the rest of the way. So she knew a lot of stuff that she could not possibly know. That how would she have known all of that? Sometimes doctors will come to the patient after they've come back they've died in an operation, and then they come back, and they will tell the doctor what he was thinking or what was happening in his personal life, which they shouldn't know.
No, certainly not.
So it's things like that, and besides that, they will meet relatives or loved ones on the other side that they've never met before, and be able to come back and tell things about that person that they couldn't possibly know. They've never met them before. Mm-hmm. So those kind of things, and also the hours that people could be dead for 14, 13, 15 hours, Another one was the longest recorded death experience is 29 hours. And this, I think it's 29 or 27. I think it's 29.
Yeah, regardless, a long time.
Yeah, and what this was, a sailor, and he was out, he was diving, deep sea diving, and with some cut buddies, and he stepped on a poison coral. And so his buddies immediately got him to the boat, but by the time they got him in there, he was gone.
Yeah.
Anyway, for some reason, maybe it was the brain thing that you're talking about, for some reason, the doctor, the ship's doctor, put EEG on his brain and left it running. And when the man came back, there was the ticker tape kind of thing all across the floor, still going. And he had been dead for 29, I think, is what I remember. But it might have been 27.
Anyway,
it's a very long time.
Yeah. All completely flat on the EEG reading the whole time.
Yeah. So those are the ones that convinced me.
Yeah. So for all these experiences, the one thing that you'll hear so often from people that are against the conclusions that we make regarding near-death experiences is that these are anecdotal. They don't have value in terms of evidence.
Right. Yeah.
What would you think about that?
Well, it is anecdotal if the person is outside of the hospital and dies. That's true. If, like Stella. Stella was, she was hit by a car. Or if a person who dies outside of a hospital, then they don't have the records. But a person who dies inside the hospital and doesn't come back and then comes back hours later, they have all the records. Everything is written down. So to me, that isn't anecdotal. It's only anecdotal what happened while they were gone. But they did die and they did come back. And they can come back with information they shouldn't know or have. So that's, to me, is pretty amazing.
It is. And to me, it would be, as you say, anecdotal as well, even if it included veridical perception, unless a third party was able to then verify that veridical perception took place, like a doctor which is why I try and push Titus Rivers and others' books, The Self Does Not Die, which has a lot of veridical perception in it. And to me, that's not anecdotal because they have been confirmed by third party individuals.
Exactly.
And just for the record, I am a believer that near-death experiences are genuinely real, but I always try to look at a physical explanation first, and if there isn't one, then that to me becomes a strong case, which is why Dr. Eben Alexander's impressed me and things like that. So the individual who was out for the 28 hours.
Yes, that's recorded.
Did he have, he had a near-death experience, presumably?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, in my book, I explain about the near. That was Dr. Moody in 1975 that first wrote about death experiences. And he said near because he didn't think the people had died. He thought that they were almost dead. And so that's why he calls them near-death experiences. But, and so that's caused a lot of confusion because people who have died and come back say, there was nothing near about it. I died, and there's proof that they died in the hospital and they're in the morgue, for heaven's sake,
And then, of course, you get into the argument of, well, is clinical death, the way we define death, actually death? And people will say it's not death until they never come back again. And if they do come back, then it's by definition near death. And that there's no argument against that. That's true. That I guess that's a true point. I mean, to me, if the brain is the key thing for me with death, and if the brain is registering activity which is not sustainable for consciousness, to me a consciousness experience shouldn't then happen. And if it happens during that period, regardless if the person is dead or not, that doesn't matter, it's how you define it. But if that brain should not be creating consciousness, and it is, that's the thing that worries me, not whether they were actually dead or not.
Well, I don't think it's sort of like you can't prove something. You can't prove a negative. You cannot prove that, and you can't prove spiritual stuff either. There's no way that there's absolute dyed-in-the-wool experience proof, except if the person has experiences like Eben Alexander, or the fellow that was gone for 29 hours. There was a woman, there's two other ones that I don't know if I had them both in there. It was one, a girl, she's a young girl, and she was suffering from something. I don't remember what. Anyway, she overdosed in pain medication, I think it was. And anyway, she was gone for 13 hours, and she was in rigor mortis when she came back. And then, and that's all recorded. And then there was, I can't remember the other one now. I've forgotten. Sorry.
That's okay. I suppose the only question that can be raised there is, did the experiences these people experienced take place when we know the brain was not working, or could it have taken place before or after it was ramping up?
Yeah. And the thing that goes back to what I was talking about before, where there are some things that happen to most people, almost everybody. The oneness is one of them, where they feel that they're connected. But there's other things. And so if all of these people talk about the same thing over and over and over, then you start to go, wait a minute, there's something here.
Especially if people from different cultures are experiencing things maybe slightly differently, but the core mechanics are still there.
Yeah, that's right.
So do you think that there's a connection between, say, psychedelics, who, when people take psychedelics, generally they experience also very, very similar things like dimethyltryptamine, LSD, that sort of thing. They all also experience this oneness. They see entities, they experience geometric patterns, with slight differences, but again, the core concepts are there. So do you think there's a link between psychedelics and the death experience?
Well, I would say no, but I do understand the question because, as you've said, there are some elements that are the same, but there's not enough. It's sort of like the doctor saying, well, DMT, which is a medication, will give the person a similar experience to death experience, but it's not a death experience, and I can identify them right away. If I'm reading, unless a person is as knowledgeable as I am about death experiences and can fake it, I guess that's possible. Then they would know what not to put in there or what to put in there. But I wouldn't. I don't think I want to look at it from a negative perspective, because I think that there's just too many. It's 2,500, and there's so many similarities. I just can't accept that they might not be true.
No, it's certainly at that point it is definitely worth considering, and unfortunately a lot of people won't even consider the possibility.
Yeah, and some people, if it isn't black and white, then it's not real, and I respect that, but that's not where I'm coming from.
No, I mean that's a perfectly good way of looking at the world, especially because everything we've discovered has been material in nature, but that doesn't then follow that everything that does exist is completely material. There may be other aspects of reality we don't know, and therefore using the black and white empirical method works for day-to-day life, although there may be things beyond that. And it's being open to consider that possibility, I suppose, which a lot more people are now, as opposed to how they used to be since Ray Moody's
people
book.
Are much more open, Yeah. And one of the things that people ask me is, what's the right religion? Mm-hmm. And that is a question that's asked on the other side. And the answer is that everyone is the right religion, except if it's teaching judgment and hate. Mm-hmm. If it teaches those kind of things, then that just doesn't belong. It doesn't fit.
Yeah. I recently had a conversation with a guy who's a Christian apologist. Very clever person. And I raised the question to him, something that I've never understood about Christianity and religions that preach a similar thing, is that, take Christianity for example, you must believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God who gave his life to save us. And it doesn't matter if you're good or bad from a human moralistic point of view. If you don't believe and if you don't put your life over to Jesus, you go to hell. And that I could never understand the fairness or the morality in that.
Yeah, and that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about. When there's judgment, and because there's no judgment on the other side. Well, if you think about it, okay, look at it from just a very, very basic point of view. So Christians and we mentioned Christians, but there's others who believe that God is the creator, okay? Or whatever word they call it, doesn't matter what word they call it. There is something, a higher being that is the creator. But if there's a creator and there's nothing else, because if there is something else, that's not the creator. If the creator is creating, what is it creating from? It doesn't have anything else. There's nothing else there.
No.
It has to create from itself. And so if it's creating from itself, that means that everything is of essence of the source. And that means that we are the source, or that the source is essence, at least that much. And God, we've been told for hundreds and thousands of years that God is love. And now we're having these kind of messages coming back and telling us God is love. And so that means that on the other side, when people die, the source does not know anything else but love. It cannot judge. It's not possible. It does. We have to look at what we've done. That part is true, but it isn't in a way of, oh, you're very bad. As a matter of fact, if we start criticizing and coming down on ourselves, the message usually is, well, don't get too upset. It's just a learning experience.
So, the majority of those that experienced the life review have said that if there is any judgment taking place, it's not from a god or from a spirit guide or from an angel telling you are bad. It's self-judgment.
Yeah, it's our own feeling of judgment to what we've done. Yeah, and that goes for the good things too. You know, we don't only see the bad things; we see good things, and we've done, and we feel good about it. You know, the soul feels great joy at seeing that they did something really good.
A friend of mine recently became very frightened. She suffers with anxiety like I do, kind of like I did back when I had a breakdown when I was very bad with it. She's kind of at that level, and she was terrified that she was going to go to hell because she's heard of experiences, near-death experiences, in which people have gone to hell.
Yes.
And there are many of them.
Yes.
It's just certainly the minority, but they do exist. Yeah,
it's about 2%.
Exactly. So why do you think that these people experience the hell that may be found in religions?
Sure. Okay, well, what happens when a person finds themselves in a negative experience, and we use hell as one of them, then they will plead to get out of there. They will plead, Well, actually, they don't. They put up with it for a while before they start thinking, well, gee, maybe I can get out of here. And anyway, they will either realize that they can get out of there, or they will plead and ask to be taken out. And every single time that a person asks, they're out. That's instantly, they're gone. They're out of there. So that's one thing. The other thing is that when they're out, now they're on the other side and they're in the love and all of that. And they'll say, what was that all about? And they are repeatedly told that they created that experience themselves. That's what they thought that they should experience, because that's what they felt about themselves.
Right. So it's a self-created environment based on their expectations.
Yeah. That's back to me saying that we're the creators of our experiences.
And I was going to say, it also lays testament to the fact that we do create our environments after death, as astral projectors also experience. During their out-of-body experiences, that it can work both ways on a more subconscious level. So it seems that the mind is very, very fundamental to our experience after death.
Yes, I don't know, because we don't have a mind. I mean, people very frequently when people leave their body, they see their body lying wherever they left it, okay, in a bed or on the ground or something. But they still bring an ethereal body with them. But that's only because they think that they have to have a body. They think
because that's all they know.
Yeah, exactly. But after they've been gone for a while, then they start to realize, well, not everybody, and I must confess that probably the majority don't get to the point of, at least the near-death experiences, the one that come back, don't get to the point of seeing themselves as spirit. But some people do. Some people see that they're a spark of light, or that they don't have a body, and they recognize that they're a spark of light. And they see sparks of light around them. And they'll recognize that spark of light over there has the essence of my father or my uncle or whatever, So, but they still, they have this understanding that this is what they are. This is their reality. I think that's beautiful.
And it's a very difficult thing to comprehend from a human standpoint, what it's like to be just, I suppose, a speck of awareness. Yeah, it is. And so they'll that's why the blind can see and the deaf can hear and the disabled can walk or jump or dance or whatever. Do whatever they want, because they don't have a body. They're not body. That's an illusion. They've created it. So I wonder how in an out-of-body state we can still have the senses that we know are required from a body. You need eyes to see, you need working eyes to see and working ears to hear. So I wonder why, when out-of-body, we still have the ability to do that without the organs that are needed.
Because we're creators. That's the main point of my book, is that the consciousness, actually, and that there's only one consciousness, and that we're part of that. We are that consciousness, and so that's part of our reality.
So what do you think then, if we damage our eyes or any of our senses and we go blind, if in an out of body state we can see clearly. How come do you think we can't override kind of the damage and see?
Okay, well, there actually we probably could. And I was just talking to somebody yesterday, and they were talking about experiments that are being done with children, where they blindfold the children, and the children can still see. So that and also they can hear acutely, like they've got acute hearing, but they can actually see while they've got the blindfolds on, and that's crazy. But and I'm not sure that an adult would be able to do that. But Anita Moorjani's book, I don't know if have you interviewed her?
I'd like to. I need to get in contact with her. I doubt she'd be. she's very well known. I doubt she'd be around.
Well, she died of stage 4 lymphoma. I don't know, the Hodgkin's lymphoma it was. Cancer, and so she was really, really in bad shape. But when she realized how beautiful and magnificent she was, and that she had the power to create this, she said that did it. She healed herself. And that's what, another thing she talked about, which I absolutely love, is that there's this warehouse with, and the warehouse is absolutely enormous. I mean, it's just huge. And we can only see a little tiny speck of it, and that's what we choose from. But we've got tons and tons of other choices that we could make that we don't even know about yet.
Yes, Anita Moorjani's experience, that's Dying to Be Me, isn't it?
In fact, when I think about it, that would be a good person, because she was dead. There was no way that she wasn't dead, you know? And so that would be a good person for you to talk to about the authenticity of near-death experiences.
Yes, I must try and get in contact with her. I do like these experiences that are, as we say, we know that they were dead during the time, because I always, as I say, try to look for a physical explanation first.
Yeah.
Because otherwise there's not much point in looking at all.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. The only other thing that I would like people to understand is how magnificent they are. We just really are so down on ourselves all the time, and we are way, way, way better than we ever thought we are, and we can do far more than we think we can do. And I just think that we need to realize that, you know, to give ourselves a chance, because we just are so fast to criticize and be down on ourselves, and we've got so much more to give to ourselves and to the world.
Brilliant. And your book is The Wonder of You, What the Near-Death Experience Tells You About Yourself.
Yes.
So you can find that.
And I'm on Facebook, Lynn Russell, and I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm on Twitter. And Twitter is ArtSoul2 is what my name is, ArtSoul2. And I'm also going to be any day now, I'll have a website up. So, and it'll be under LynnKRussell.com.